I still remember the weight of that envelope in my hands on Christmas morning, how the cheap paper felt so different from the silk ribbon jewelry box my sister Chloe had just unwrapped. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but after 26 years of being the overlooked daughter, I had learned to swallow disappointment like bitter medicine. The morning had started like every other Christmas in the Whitmore household. Our mansion gleamed with Eleanor's obsessive attention to detail, every ornament positioned with mathematical precision, every surface polished to mirror perfection. She had orchestrated the scene like a Broadway director, placing herself center stage in her burgundy velvet dress, while Richard commanded his usual position by the fireplace, projecting authority even in his holiday sweater. Chloe, radiant in her latest designer ensemble, was the star of this carefully choreographed performance. At 23, she possessed that effortless beauty that opened doors and hearts alike. Her golden hair caught the morning light streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows, and her laugh tinkled like expensive champagne glasses touching in celebration. "Darling," Eleanor had cooed, her voice dripping with maternal devotion as she presented Chloe with that elegant box. "A special gift for our special girl, to start your new life with Liam." Inside weren't just keys, but the deed to a penthouse in the heart of downtown Seattle. The price tag, I later learned, was close to $2 million. Chloe's scream of delight could have shattered crystal, and she threw herself into Eleanor's arms with the enthusiasm of a child on her first Christmas. "Oh my God, Mom, this is incredible. I love you guys so much," Chloe had gushed, already planning her housewarming party and showing off photos to her equally privileged friends. Then Richard turned to me. No warm smile, no theatrical presentation. Just my father, this man who had built his reputation on being a pillar of the community, a successful businessman who donated to charities and sat on the boards of prestigious organizations, handing me a plain manila envelope with the same expression he might use to dismiss an incompetent employee. "Yours," he said simply. "I hope it helps you become more responsible." The word stung, but not as much as what I found inside. Among the papers was a student loan statement I'd never seen before, showing a debt of over $180,000 with accumulated interest. Below it, a handwritten note in Richard's familiar scrawl. "Time to take care of yourself." These weren't my loans. I had received a full scholarship to study architecture at the University of Washington, something I'd been proud of, despite my parents' lukewarm response. But seeing my signature forged on documents I'd never signed, realizing my social security number had been used to secure funding for God knows what, I felt something crack inside my chest. The room continued to buzz with excitement around Chloe's gift. Liam, her fiancé, was already discussing renovation plans for the penthouse. He was everything my parents admired. Handsome, charming, from old money. What they didn't know was that his family's fortune was built on smoke and mirrors, and he was desperately seeking a financial lifeline through marriage to their precious daughter. I folded the papers carefully, slipped them into my purse, and excused myself to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I called Ben, the only person who had ever truly seen through my family's golden facade. "Ben, it's Ava. I need your help. Something's happened." Ben Martinez had been my closest friend since our freshman year at university. While I struggled to find my voice in our architecture program, he had blazed through law school with fierce determination. Now, at 28, he was one of Seattle's most respected financial attorneys, known for his razor-sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty to his clients. Within an hour, Ben was at my apartment, his laptop open, legal documents spread across my small dining table. What he uncovered over the next week made my Christmas morning revelation look like a paper cut compared to a severed limb. "Ava," he said on the third day of his investigation, his voice tight with controlled anger, "they didn't just take out loans in your name. They've created an entire financial identity for you." The evidence was overwhelming. Credit cards with limits exceeding $50,000 each, all maxed out. A shell company called Ava Whitmore Consulting that existed solely to funnel money away from Chloe's failed cosmetics business. Investment accounts opened in my name, emptied to cover Richard's increasingly desperate business ventures. But the discovery that shattered what remained of my faith in my family came on day 5. Ben's face was pale when he handed me the deed to my grandmother's lake house. They forged your signature, he said quietly. Use the house as collateral for a $2 million loan. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings in 30 days. That house represented everything good in my childhood. My grandmother, Margaret's mother, had left it to both Chloe and me in her will. It was where I'd spent summers learning to paint watercolors on the wraparound porch, where I designed my first building in the treehouse my grandfather had built. It was my sanctuary, my connection to the only family member who had ever truly loved me unconditionally. Now it was gone, sacrificed to maintain the illusion of the Whitmore family's prosperity. I stared at the forged signature, a crude approximation of my careful handwriting, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt transformed into something harder, more focused. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my future, my identity, my right to exist as something more than collateral damage in their pursuit of social status. What are our options? I asked Ben, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. We could file criminal charges. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. They could face serious jail time. I shook my head. Prison is too easy. I want them to understand what it feels like to lose everything that defines them. Ben studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What did you have in mind? The plan we crafted was elegant in its simplicity. Using my savings and a loan from Ben, we arranged to purchase the debt on my grandmother's house from the bank through a shell company of our own. Instead of being a victim of foreclosure, I would become the creditor. More importantly, we timed our move to coincide with Chloe and Liam's engagement party, which my parents had insisted on hosting at the lake house. For 3 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I attended family dinners, smiled at the appropriate moments, and listened to endless discussions about wedding plans and Chloe's exciting new life. Eleanor fawned over every detail of the upcoming celebration, treating it like a coronation. Richard basked in the admiration of their social circle, accepting congratulations on his successful daughters as if he had personally achieved our accomplishments. Chloe, oblivious to the financial quicksand beneath her designer shoes, planned her party with the enthusiasm of someone who had never wanted for anything. She selected the most expensive caterer, hired a string quartet, and invited 200 of Seattle's social elite to witness her fairy tale romance. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were celebrating her future in a house they had stolen from both of us. The morning of the engagement party, I dressed carefully in a navy blue power suit that Ben had helped me select. It was armor, professional and unforgiving, the outfit of someone who meant business. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the eager-to-please daughter who had spent years hoping for scraps of approval. In her place stood someone who knew her worth and was prepared to fight for it. The lake house was transformed for the occasion. White tents dotted the manicured lawn, flowers cascaded from every surface, and staff members in crisp uniforms moved efficiently through the space, preparing for the evening's festivities. Eleanor supervised every detail with military precision, ensuring that this night would cement their reputation as the perfect American family. Guests began arriving at 6 o'clock. Seattle's power brokers mingled on the terrace, champagne glasses catching the setting sun's reflection off the lake. Richard held court near the bar, regaling a group of business associates with stories about his latest ventures. He looked completely at ease, the picture of a successful patriarch celebrating his daughter's bright future. Chloe was radiant in a flowing white dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She moved through the crowd like a princess at her own ball, accepting congratulations and admiring glances with practiced grace. Liam stayed close to her side, playing the role of devoted fiancé while his eyes constantly scanned the room, calculating the net worth of potential connections. I waited until Richard stood to make his toast. The timing had to be perfect. Friends, family, esteemed colleagues, Richard began, his voice carrying easily across the gathered crowd. Tonight, we celebrate not just the union of two wonderful young people, but the continuation of family traditions and values that have guided us for generations. The crowd murmured appreciatively as Richard launched into his prepared speech about love, commitment, and the bright future awaiting Chloe and Liam. He spoke about legacy, about building something lasting, about the importance of family in an uncertain world. It was the perfect setup for what came next. Tradition, Richard continued, gesturing toward the house behind him, is about more than just buildings and bank accounts. It's about the values we pass down, the lessons we teach our children, about responsibility and integrity. That was my cue. I stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, Ben beside me carrying a leather briefcase. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as guests recognized me, confusion rippling through the gathering. I wasn't supposed to be there. I hadn't been invited. Speaking of tradition and integrity, I said, my voice cutting through the evening air with surgical precision, I have something to share. Richard's face went through a series of expressions, settling on barely controlled irritation. Ava, what are you doing here? This isn't the time for whatever drama you're planning. Actually, Richard, I said, noting how his flinch at my use of his first name, this is exactly the right time. Ben opened his briefcase and handed me a folder thick with legal documents. The silence was absolute now. 200 pairs of eyes watching this unexpected performance. I wanted to thank you publicly for teaching me such valuable lessons about family. I continued, opening the folder. For instance, you taught me that family members forge each other's signatures on legal documents. You showed me how family members use their children's identities to hide financial failures. And you demonstrated that family members steal inheritances to fund their own desperate attempts to maintain appearances. Eleanor's face had gone white. Ava, stop this immediately. You're embarrassing yourself and your family. My family? I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Eleanor, you lost the right to call yourself my family the moment you decided my future was worth less than Chloe's comfort. I pulled out the foreclosure notice, holding it high enough for the front rows to see. This house, which you're using tonight to celebrate Chloe's engagement, was supposed to be my inheritance too. My grandmother left it to both of her granddaughters. But when Richard's business ventures started failing, when maintaining the illusion of success became more expensive than actual success, you decided to sacrifice my share. The crowd was riveted now, sensing blood in the water. Richard's business associates exchanged glances, calculating how this scandal might affect their own relationships with him. Eleanor looked like she might faint, one hand pressed to her throat as if she couldn't breathe. The foreclosure notice you're holding, Ben interjected smoothly, has been resolved. The debt has been purchased by my client's company. Ms. Whitmore is now the legal owner of the outstanding mortgage. I smiled then, and it felt like the first genuine smile I'd worn in years. Which means I'm now the one with the power to foreclose. And I'm exercising that power effective immediately. The chaos that erupted was spectacular. Eleanor began hyperventilating, clutching at Richard's arm for support. Guests pushed closer, phones emerging to capture the moment for social media. In the span of 30 seconds, the Whitmore family's carefully constructed reputation crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. But I wasn't finished. Chloe, I said, turning to my sister, who stood frozen in the center of the melee. I want you to know that every luxury you've enjoyed for the past 3 years, every shopping spree, every designer dress, every exotic vacation, was paid for with money stolen from my future. Your cosmetics company, the one that failed so spectacularly, the losses were hidden in accounts opened in my name. Your penthouse, your car, your entire lifestyle has been subsidized by identity theft. Chloe's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. She looked to Richard for help, for explanation, for anything that might make sense of what was happening. That's when Liam made his move. I watched with satisfaction as he processed the implications of what he'd just heard. The Whitmore fortune wasn't just diminished. It was built on fraud. The family he'd been so eager to marry into was about to face criminal charges. The social status he'd been pursuing was evaporating in real time. He looked at Chloe with an expression I recognized, the same calculating coldness Richard used when assessing unprofitable business ventures. Slowly, deliberately, Liam reached for Chloe's left hand and slid the engagement ring from her finger. I think there's been a misunderstanding about our arrangement, he said, with the smooth detachment of someone cutting a bad investment loose. He placed the ring on the nearest table and straightened his jacket. I'll be in touch through my attorneys. And with that, he walked away, leaving Chloe standing alone in her white dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect life. Chloe crumpled then, sinking to the ground in a pool of expensive fabric and broken dreams. Eleanor rushed to her side, keening like a wounded animal. Richard stood motionless, the foreclosure notice trembling in his hands, watching his empire collapse in front of everyone who mattered in his world. The guests began to disperse, conversations already shifting to how quickly they could distance themselves from the Whitmore family scandal. Business relationships would be severed, social invitations withdrawn, and charity board positions quietly vacated. In one evening, Richard had gone from pillar of the community to cautionary tale. Ben and I walked away from the chaos, back to our car parked at the edge of the property. Behind us, the white tents stood like monuments to hubris, elegant and empty as the people who had built their lives on the foundation of others' pain. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and personal reconstruction. I sold the lake house, along with all the other assets I'd managed to recover through Ben's meticulous legal work. The money allowed me to start my own architectural firm, specializing in sustainable design and community development projects. My parents tried reaching out, of course. Eleanor called daily for weeks, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. Richard attempted to schedule meetings through intermediaries, probably hoping to negotiate some kind of settlement that would keep him out of prison. I blocked their numbers, changed my address, and instructed Ben to handle any legal communications. Chloe was the most persistent. She showed up at my office building, at my gym, at the coffee shop where I like to work on weekends. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced with Target basics, her perfectly styled hair grown out to its natural mousy brown. The transformation was startling, like seeing a beautiful actress without makeup and professional lighting. "Please," she begged during her final attempt to reach me, cornering me in the parking garage of my apartment building. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know where the money was coming from. Mom and Dad handled everything. I thought we were just successful. I studied her face, looking for signs of the spoiled princess who had accepted luxury as her birthright. What I saw instead was a young woman who had never been taught to question good fortune, who had lived her entire life in a bubble of privilege and protection. In some ways, she was as much a victim of Richard and Eleanor's choices as I was. But that didn't change what needed to happen. "Chloe," I said gently, "I forgive you for not knowing, but I can't trust you not to enable them again. They raised you to believe that your comfort matters more than other people's rights. Until you unlearn that lesson, we can't have a relationship." She cried then, ugly sobs that echoed through the concrete garage. I felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy, but I didn't stop walking to my car. Compassion didn't require me to set myself on fire to keep someone else warm. A year later, I stood in my new office, looking out over the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that I had designed myself. The space was everything my childhood home wasn't. Honest materials, clean lines, and natural light that revealed rather than concealed. My company had already completed 3 major projects, each one earning recognition for innovation and environmental responsibility. Ben knocked on my open door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had helped orchestrate a perfect victory. "The final papers came through today," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Richard's plea deal was accepted. 3 years in minimum security, plus restitution for the identity theft charges. Eleanor got 2 years probation and community service. And Chloe, no charges. The prosecutor agreed that she was more enabler than accomplice. He paused, studying my face. "She's enrolled in community college. Business administration, apparently. Working part-time at a marketing firm." I nodded, surprised by the small surge of pride I felt. Maybe there was hope for my sister after all. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen for the first time in months. I looked at it for a moment, remembering Christmas morning and the weight of that envelope in my hands. Then I smiled and declined the call, adding her number to my permanent blocked list. There was a time when that action would have filled me with guilt, when the daughter in me would have worried about disappointing the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But I had learned the difference between family and relatives, between love and manipulation, between loyalty and self-destruction. I turned back to the architectural plans spread across my desk, blueprints for a community center in one of Seattle's underserved neighborhoods. The project would provide after-school programs, job training, and resources for families struggling to build better lives. It was the kind of work that mattered, the kind of legacy I wanted to create. Ben raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To the Ash legacy," he said with a grin. I laughed, understanding the reference. My family's empire had burned to the ground, leaving nothing but ash and bitter memories. But from those ashes I had built something new, something real, something mine. "To the Ash legacy," I agreed, and took a sip of my coffee. Outside, Seattle stretched toward the horizon, full of possibility and promise. I had work to do, buildings to design, communities to serve. I had a life to live on my own terms, with people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. It was everything I had never known I wanted, and everything I had always deserved. The best revenge, I had learned, wasn't destroying the people who had hurt me. It was building a life so fulfilling, so authentic, so completely my own, that their absence felt like freedom rather than loss. And every morning when I woke up in my apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, when I walked into my office and saw my name on the door, when I signed contracts with my own hand for projects that would outlast any family drama, I was reminded of the most important lesson of all. I was enough. I had always been enough. And I would never again apologize for taking up space in a world that was mine to shape.